Hello and welcome to our post-posh pummeling podcast in your ears on From The Rookery End and, of course, in your eyes, like the game last night, unfortunately, via YouTube on WD18. Joining me for the unenviable task of picking through the debris of last night's demolition is the Watford Observer's Adam Drury. Adam, the morning after the night before, how are you feeling?
Yeah, it was probably a game which should have been one of the most innocuous of the season and has actually prompted maybe the biggest fallout of any game so far. It was tough, wasn't it? It was a rough night on many levels, and I think the fallout is quite multifaceted. So, it'd be interesting to talk through it all.
I think you're right, because really the result is only a small part of the overarching story, isn't it? Obviously, it's eye-catching, but the starting 11 and how we arrived there really is the crux of the matter. And it struck me sort of driving home from the game last night that we've talked about the state of the squad and how thin it is so much. We've almost got used to it. It's almost like wallpaper. It's almost a bit of an abstract notion, isn't it? It's almost like the turnover of head coaches. It's just something we've got used to as Watford supporters. But that was until we saw it laid bare last night. That was the first time we saw the reality of having a squad as thin as this going into a season. And it really brought home what is a really serious situation, didn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think clearly the defensive issues are the biggest, particularly at centre back. I mean, we should say there are two injuries at fullback, and if everybody was fit, it wouldn't have been as inexperienced as it was. But I mean, one of those injuries is Jeremy Ngakia, who unfortunately has spent a lot of time injured since he signed. The Mark Bowler injury is just unfortunate.
But the point is, Adam, of course, that a squad should be designed to be able to withstand injuries.
Yeah, of course. And at centre back, we're not even. I mean, at least in the first 11, there are fullbacks on each side who are first team ready. At centre back, there isn't any depth whatsoever. And it was badly exposed. I thought in the first half they did okay. You wouldn't say that they were outclassed or made to look silly. In the second half, Peterborough were just able to pick apart that backline so easily, and it did actually highlight just how good like championship ready players are, just how together they look, just how that back line looks organised. The distances between the lines are right, whereas in the 20 minutes after half time there were just balls over the top. I think the fourth goal was just a simple ball over the top, shot was saved and the tap in, and it was a reminder of just how awkward these things can look when you've got players who aren't ready. And the coach was very clear about it afterwards.
I was sat behind one of the presenters. I think it was radio. It would be Radio Cambridgeshire, wouldn't it? The Locust one. And you knew it was bad because every time that Peterborough went forward, he was filming the Peterborough fans on the basis that there's a very high chance that Peterborough were going to score, and he could get some good footage of the Peterborough fans celebrating. It felt like every time they went forward for a period, they were going to score. We'll come back to the game, Adam, in a minute, but I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about this wider issue about the state of the squad. And look, I think it's possible to accept that being properly competitive in the Championship is difficult. I think it's incredibly expensive. The market is unfriendly. People are spending lots of money, and I'd argue that there are probably Championship clubs, well, and beyond, above them and below them, spending more money than they should. I think the whole industry is based on sand, and there is, as usual, a wider issue to be had about the future of football and finance and its viability. But being as it stands, there is a straight line between how much you're able to spend on wages and transfers and how competitive you are. I think it's okay to accept that, whilst on the other hand, recognising that going into a season with a squad as desperately thin as this is unheard of. Really, it's certainly for Watford, and that last night will have been the weakest side put out by a Watford senior side in living memory. I would have thought, but just to go in so thin, so weak is, and again making the point that it is tough out there. Getting the right signings is difficult, but the ownership have a job. They have a care of duty to put out a football team that is fit for purpose. Other people do their jobs in difficult circumstances. If you're a postman, for example, and it's absolutely thundering down with rain, lightning and everything, you get wet, you get soaked, it's a horrible situation, but you find a way to deliver the post. Not quite a direct correlation between being a postman and a football club owner, but you know what I mean. It's tough out there, but also, how have we managed to be in a situation where we cannot field a competitive side against a League One side who themselves made a host of changes? How have we arrived here?
Yeah, you're right. And I think particularly in defence, this scenario has been signposted for a long time. As you say, we can actually go back beyond the end of last season, because the defence was filled with loanees last year, 2 from Man City, various loanees from Udinese. And it's been the case since the end of the last summer window that we have 2 senior contracted centre-backs for the start of this season. And we often hear from Gianluca Nani and other members of the hierarchy who talk about shortlists and how they work from window to window. They don't just start on January the 1st. They're starting on September the 1st for January. They're starting on February the 1st for the summer. They've had a long time to plan for this. And I think there are a couple of interesting threads. I mean, firstly, lots of players have left this summer and left quite early in the summer. So it's not the case that we've been hurrying players out the door to create room in the squad. 4 defensive loanees left at the end of last season, including James Abanka, who I think everyone would have been happy to see come back. I think a relatively high earner in Tom Ince, Papi Mendy, will have been on decent money. Moussa Sissoko was on decent money and left last January. I've been told the fee for Shaq Fatadza was okay and helped boost the coffers back in June. We've then lost Nestoria and Kunda around the start of August for a considerable fee. And so you're sort of reaching the stage where you question, how on earth can we not find any money down the back of the sofa to bring in some free agents and loans by this stage? And I still think that will end up probably being the case, that they will come in defence. But as you say, last night, I mean, it's a wake-up call, I suppose, but it's a wake-up call we all knew was coming. So you would hope the people at the top of the club knew it was going to as well. And there is this relationship with Udinese, and I know people have found it frustrating that so many players have come in from there already this summer. But let's face it, a few of those players who come in look pretty good. Zamura's done well. Bravo looks excellent. Mm-hmm. That's a decent source of players for a club that's in a multi-club model. And if it ends up being the case that we're scrabbling around for anyone at the end of the deadline, or that Udinese players come in, I don't really see why that couldn't have been part of the flurry of incomings in July. So lots of questions about finances. And as I say, we're in a model with a Serie A club that performs really well year on year. There's not really much of a reason, and we've seen it in Watford's not too distant past, not too much of a reason not to fill the squad with competitive players.
Yeah, and I did want to sort of just push that point a little bit. And there is a wider conversation to be had about, there is obviously no money at Watford, mm-hmm. and there's a long conversation to be had about that. Why? I think relegation from the Premier League gets used as a bit of a catch-all reason for there being a huge shortfall in Watford's finances. Should that have been the case is something that we need to look back on and understand, I think. But what the clear reality is that Gino Pozzo isn't putting any money in to the football club, which on one hand is sensible, trying to make it sustainable. So you could argue that's a sensible way of running a football club. It's not a popular way. Ask Tottenham fans, ask Newcastle fans. But the bottom line is, for whatever reason, and it's not a conversation for today, that's something that needs to be looked into further. There is no money, and I've actually sensed, which is actually quite welcome for me personally. I think at the fans forum I wasn't there, but what I did detect from the stuff we've been able to pick up from those that were, was a very definite shift in tone in terms of where the football club are outwardly saying they were, or certainly the people that were in attendance that night. They were talking about how we haven't really got money to invest. They were talking about not challenging at the top. They're talking about just actually trying to hold our own for a little bit, which for me is quite a big change from what we've heard previously at either fans forums or in between seasons, which have been quite bullish statements about how we're going to try and do this, how we're going to do this, we're in good shape. And I actually think had this sort of conversation happened sooner, the fans would have been more sort of willing to get their shoulders to the wheel. What we've found already this season, that we're kind of in a similar situation as we were with Tom Cleverley. We knew that Tom Cleverley was left short in terms of the squad. I mean, this squad is significantly worse than the one Tom had. But there's an alignment with the manager and the fans at wanting them to do well. But a sort of distrust, really, of the fact that he's not going to be backed, he's not going to be able to do anything, he's just end up going to be sacked, which is just frustrating to be there again, because Dionisi feels like he's got the backing and trust of the supporters. The league performances have already shown enough that. But what I'm getting at is, what is the actual strategy? Yes, there's been that shift in almost an acceptance that we're not going to be able to compete at the top table because of the financial situation. So, but to go in this bad is a sort of past that, isn't it? It's past scrabbing around for cash. You have to do something, because you have to put a football team out that is capable of being competitive. So what, you might not know the answer to this, and I'm probably a bit old man shouting at the moon here, but what actually is Gino's strategy at this stage, considering we've got no money, considering we've got no fund? Is it we're just waiting for the last couple of the days of the transfer window, where we mentioned Udinese, which done right should be great for Watford and has been in the past, as we well know. I haven't got a problem with us utilising the opportunities that are available to us in that regard. It's just common sense. But are we waiting for the last couple of days of the transfer window, when Udinese players might realise they're out of the picture at the first in the first team picture in Serie A and might be more amenable to a move to Watford? Or are we literally running around with a shopping trolley talking to players who haven't got a move elsewhere and might say, well, I'll go and give it a go at Watford? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, it does. There's no other way of looking at it, really, is there? Dionisi said last night he's not expecting too much before Saturday, so it looks like we are going into the final 2 or 3 days of the window, and that really does paint a picture of probably Gino waiting as long as possible to drive these deals down in terms of value as far as he can before he signs off on them. And that could be Udinese, that could be domestic players who have been linked this week. I think there is some truth in some of the names that have been out there, but Watford are, I think, offering deals at a certain level and waiting and hoping that players and clubs will come down and match them in the final days of the window. That's my reading of it. And I think there is also, we have to acknowledge, appears to be some misalignment with other members of the hierarchy. So we spoke to Luke Dowling weeks ago, who talked about the need to not wait until the final days of the window to get at least one centre-back, ideally 2, through the door. He wanted signings for Southampton. We can go back to Scott Duxbury saying in May that he would insist the recruitment team signed experienced EFL players. There's been little sign of that, really. We'll see what comes in the final days. But a picture is built of some people inside the club trying to push things in a certain direction, and then others, probably the owner, being much more, we can say, prudent, careful with money. As you say, no money is being invested. The only money that will go out is what he is comfortable with the club spending once enough of the shortfall has been covered. And I think the realignment of expectation this summer essentially tells us that the aim isn't so much to really push for promotion as to try and exist in the Championship. So I think that is the plan. Yeah. It's to basically, without, if you don't want to sound too stark about it, but to try and exist in the Championship on as small a budget as possible. That's really the picture that's being painted.
Yeah, and I think I have sympathy for people like Luke Dowling, who you assume are going out working on deals, talking to players, talking to agents, which is a minefield in and of itself. That's hard work and unenviable. But you're putting together prospective deals, and effectively you're taking a sheet to Gino and going yes or no. And what it sounds like, I mean, I certainly don't know, but it sounds like Gino's just going, no, that one's not going to work. So for all we know, Luke Dowling might have brought 10, 15, 20 prospective deals to the table, and they've all just been shut down on the basis of like you say, Adam, that we need enough money to cover the annual shortfall, which is coming down, but is in the region of 16 million quid every year. So you'd like to think that potentially we've just about done that, and now it's about sanctioning anything else. But the only conclusion we can make is that Gino isn't stupid. He does understand football and the requirement for actual football players. So for the assumption, the conclusion, and I don't think this is being outlandish or hyperbolic, is that he's willing to go in, that the need to not spend money is greater than the need to have a functioning football team. That's the only conclusion.
I think we can certainly say that if the squad still looks the way it does in a week's time. I mean, I think at the moment the need to have players in for the first 3 or 4 games of the season has not been as great as maybe spending a little bit more to get them. We'll see what happens by the end of the window, but I know we're going to come on to it a little bit more. But I think the actions of this window have hung a few individuals out to dry last night during that game. And it is a test over the next few days of how serious he is about being at all competitive this year.
Well, let's talk about deals happening relatively late in the window. It looks as though Imran Louza is off to Panathinaikos. I don't know if you've got any detail about that, Adam. It's
not a huge amount, other than it looks like he's going, on a permanent deal.
And you would hope that if he's going on a permanent deal, that is a relatively good fee might come in, and perhaps this is what they've been waiting for in terms of freeing up some money to bring some new recruits in. What the transfer fee would be for Louza is debatable. I think there's been a clear issue with him that ultimately I think it becomes pretty evident that no one's wanted him. Deal for Chakvetadze was done early. Deal for Iran Kunda was sort of, it dragged on in the end, didn't it? But it looked like that one was a goer very early. Imran Louza in that bracket as one of our supposed better players, and let's face it, he's one of the most talented players in the squad for sure. But I think he's been a victim of being in a very average Watford side, but also potentially his attitude and his cultural shortfallings becoming widely known, and that has potentially been an issue, not being able to move him onto a deal that both he and Watford see as being mutually beneficial. So hopefully this is one that will unlock the gates to potentially a little bit of action in the final few days of this quite incredible, really, transfer window. So we'll watch this space. We put it off. I think we'd almost 20 minutes in, Adam. We haven't really talked about last night. Watford 1, Peterborough 5. In fact, it struck me this morning that the last 2 matches I've been to have ended 5-1. I was at Barnet v Arsenal under-21s, and Barnet beat Arsenal 5-1. So perhaps it's not that uncommon after all. And, of course, Celtic lost 5-1 last night to crash out of the Champions League. So perhaps 5-1's the new 2-0, whatever. But the headline was that back four, wasn't it? And I think it's telling something. It was really, really telling when we all breathed a sigh of relief. It's like, thank heavens we've got the experience of Albert Eames in there.
That's how it felt. That's how I felt when I looked at the lineup. He was the elder statesman, having gained 50 minutes of first-team experience at Wrexham on Saturday.
Can you run us through? Albert Eames, I think, performed well last night. I think he's one that definitely is going to have a future in the first-team squad. He looked good against Wrexham. He looked okay last night in a very, very difficult situation. But those other three, Adam, can you complete the back four and just very briefly what their background is in terms of experience, just to really contextualise what we were going into last night with?
Well, James Claridge, we've sort of known a bit about for a little while. He's actually 22, so it's a little bit of a surprise that he's still sort of knocking around in this sort of zone that he's in, where he's still considered a young player and not first team. Needs to check how long his contract is. But if you remember, he was involved 2 years ago in Tom Cleverley's pre-season, and Cleverley sort of liked him, but then eventually got more senior players in and he was loaned out. So I don't want to be harsh and I don't know for sure, but it would be a surprise if age 22 he was going to make the step up to first team regular at this stage. So he is kind of filling out the squad for now until something else happens. Raphael London is 17. I think he's signed from Chelsea in 2023. So he sort of initially came from Chelsea, left footer, known to be a good ball player, but has only played once or twice for the under 21s. Never been in a senior squad, I don't think. And so Josh Mullins is more senior, and actually I've watched him a few times and I think he's pretty good, but he's been loaned out to Wealdstone. Tom Georgiou as well is on loan at Berkhamsted. So they were the two who probably would have played if they were around. Mullins is only on loan till next week, so I'm not sure whether the option would have been there to bring him back. But anyway, Raphael London is basically the fourth choice centre-back available at the club at the moment, so he had to play. Known to be, I think, quite a good ball player, but yeah, it's just very tough on a 17-year-old. And then the left-back, Tamiwa Akinyamika, is someone I think Dionisi actually quite likes. He's been training with the first team most of the summer. He started the friendly at Barnet before Zamora had come in, so he was kind of that second choice to Bolla through pre-season. And actually I thought showed a few nice touches on the ball, but as I said earlier, as part of that defensive line, it was difficult for the fullbacks against rapid, good wingers that Peterborough had as well.
Yeah, he's also got an absolute monster throw as well, I noticed. Which,
almost seemed to catch his own teammates off guard, because the first one lobbed over everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think those. I mean, the last two, they're 17. They need to go out on loan. They need to play more. You never know about their future, but it was tough to pitch them all in together. I think that was the biggest thing for me. So Eames did well at Wrexham on Saturday, but I was there. I was watching Matty Pollock shepherd him through the whole half, instructions, gesticulations, and so on. That's what you need. You want to be blooding one or two of them. They gain a little bit of experience in a team that already functions, and then you never know. But for all four to play together, I think there is an argument that they were certainly exposed and hung out to dry a little bit by the situation at the club, because you fear for those guys on what should have been a dream night of their lives.
Yeah,
you hope it's not too scarring an experience, but they've got time. I'm sure they'll bounce back.
Well, let's just touch on that briefly. It is a curious one, isn't it? Because you saw them warming up, and in their dreams, they'd have thinking, right, let's try and keep a clean sheet, and if we can win this game, it would be an absolutely extraordinary achievement for us as a unit. And I think individually, none of them did anything that was, worthy of overt criticism. I think individually they were fine. They were absolutely fine. I felt for London, who came off at half time. And that's tough to take. Ironically, Kevin replaced him, who knows exactly what it's like to come on at half time, and turned in a performance, by the way, that's likely to get you taken off at half time when he came on. I thought he was very lackadaisical when he came on, and it was his mistake that gifted Peterborough the third and effectively put the game to bed. But just to touch on that, I guess it is part of being a professional sportsman. You are going to have highs and you're going to have lows, and I think especially when you're younger, those lows can be pretty crushing. And I guess it's the job of the people who are still around the academy. So Maps is in part of the first team setup, and there's that nice through line now with him. He will have worked with these guys. To this next couple of days, really get an arm around those guys and make sure that this is a stepping stone as opposed to a sort of cracked paving slab that they trip over, if that makes sense. We can't really. That's something that needs to happen, isn't it? Because that was a bruising encounter for us as supporters. But if you're a 17-year-old being pitched into that, to actually play in it and to make your debut is your debut. You never get another one. Yeah, it's tough. So there's a job of work to be done there, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's been quite a summer for those guys, because they basically told out of the blue in May that the under-21 team was being scrapped completely. So that's been their lifeblood. That's what they do at the club. Then suddenly, from their futures looking very uncertain, they're pitched in with the first team and fulfilling first team fixtures through the summer. It's a really difficult period for, I guess, guys like James Claridge, who might be thinking, I want to leave and crack on with my career here. but he needs to hang around just to fill out numbers and potentially fill numbers until deadline day, which isn't convenient for him. So yeah, I think there's all of that comes into it. I mean, Maps is obviously part of the first team coaching setup now, but I'm sure he'll be a good person to have around them, because Eames and Claridge I would expect to be on the bench at least on Saturday. So there isn't that much time really to get over it. They're going to have to crack on for now. Yeah, it's tough. Just a rough night, and you hope you do. I think the right things are in place at the club, from what I understand, around the academy to look after these guys, even if the attitude from higher up in the club hasn't really promoted the academy players particularly over the years.
Yeah, and I think probably what it speaks to is, you're right to mention the let's call it a restructure of the academy and the youth setup at Watford. It does very much feed into what we were talking about earlier in terms of cost cutting and trying to bring down the bottom line and trying to bring down the money that it costs to run the football club. And but yeah, I think it was Andrew French that made the point last night. It's ironic that the under-21 team has effectively been axed, and then half the first team was reliant on it.
Yep.
On it last night. Talking about being reliant, Adam, I was disappointed with with the few experienced pros that played last night. You talked about Matty Pollock guiding Albert Eames through the game at Wrexham, and there's been plenty of feedback on that. I think Albert's spoken about how helpful it was for him to have that alongside him in a tough atmosphere against a tough physical side in Wrexham. So we've seen what can be done with that help. It just didn't come last night, did it? And we've talked a lot about how Dionisi it feels like he's changed the culture to be players wanting to play for him, wanting to play for the badge, wanting to play for us as supporters. And part of that is effectively doing what you're told when you're told to do it, whether you like it or not. And for example, you could imagine Mr. Kayembe, Edo Kayembe, texting Mrs. Kayembe saying, "Oh, bloody hell, love, this time last month I was playing with some of the world's greatest players at the World Cup, and now I'm being asked to babysit a bunch of 17-year-olds who have never really played any competitive football at all." You can understand him thinking that privately, but as a professional, your job is to do what Matty Pollock did on Saturday, which is guide these guys through it. You have a responsibility to these guys, as we've spoken about, in terms of their their progression and their experiences as a footballer, but also to the team to try and get them through it, to try and drag them through this difficult tie. And I think Piero looked like he kind of does. He sort of motors around, making life difficult for people. He did that to start with, and I think, let's face it, Doumbia, who striking issues are another one to add to our litany of problems. He could have equalised pretty quickly. He had 2 chances to make it 1-1, and I suspect it probably would have been a very different game had he done so. Watford did all right in the opening exchanges, didn't they? In terms of getting forward, Piero was a part of that. But as the game went on, his influence waned dramatically. He was substituted. Kayembe's influence, such as it was, dissipated completely. By the end, it looked like he was out for a dog walk. And really, bearing in mind the multitude of issues at play on a macro level, that's bad enough. But on a micro level, when you're playing against a team who's tearing you apart, you just need to bloody pull your socks up, roll your sleeves up, and if it's damage limitation, that's what it is. But don't turn it in. We've seen enough of that, and it won't take too many performances like that where senior pros just go, "Too hard this, I'm not interested." We saw it too much last season, specifically the final third. That wasn't good enough from a couple of them, was it?
No. Kayembe's intensity was, I was going to say, as if he was treating it like an under-21 run around, like to improve his fitness, but that probably does a disservice to under-21 football, which I know is played at a decent intensity. He he trotted around in the second half. It seemed to me as though it was a low-key training session for him just to tune up and get a few minutes in his legs at a time when you're right, you've got a professional responsibility to engage, but also you've got your mates who you've been training with all summer who are struggling behind you. And it was a case of damage limitation during the second half. Like, you need to get tight, close the distances, help them out, come and get the ball off them, win a foul. Just that urgency to help out the guys who were struggling in defence, I thought was really lacking. And when Hector Kyprianou came on and actually did that, I thought he highlighted how absent it had been from the others, because he was mopping up. He was playing quick passes. He was almost playing like the dad in the playground who, is choosing who needs to get a touch of the ball. I thought he did settle things down, because let's face it, the score could have got a lot worse. And Dionisi did have to use some of the other senior guys as well. Like Bove came on, and I'm sure he wouldn't have wanted to, but it was almost becoming a welfare issue. Like, let's just get through this and not get hammered by even more. So I thought Kyprianou and Bove did well when they came on, but highlighted the other two for their efforts, which I thought, were very disappointing, particularly when you see the energy levels going down as it gets worse. And that's really what we don't want to see. So I don't know. I don't know whether that will have been picked up on in the dressing room, whether it will be addressed. It's probably, as you said, a set of circumstances that we'll very rarely see again. But I was disappointed in those two for sure.
Yeah, we definitely got incrementally worse as that game went on, to the point where Dionisi had no choice but to bring on some senior players to stop it being an absolute, it was a rout, but it could have been even more embarrassing than it already was. I just want to touch on Doumbia quickly, Adam. It does highlight where we're at again with strikers at the football club for the third, fourth season in a row. We're in a situation where we haven't got a number 9 who we really believe is going to put the ball in the net. He showed again last night he's good at showing for the ball. He's got that uncanny knack of getting his leg in between the ball and defenders and winning balls that he shouldn't necessarily. But he had chances to score last night. And what was frustrating was it wasn't a surprise he didn't. And again, if you could hear the conversations coming out of Vicarage Road about strikers, I'd imagine 90% of the 7,000 were there last night saying if we could combine Luca with Doumbia, you'd have a striker, but we haven't, and that is another real issue. We talked about the centre-back problem on and on and on, and one would assume that's going to get sorted. We do need a striker as well. I don't know if there's any update on Michail Antonio, Adam, but I think putting our eggs in that basket is problematic, because yes, he might be good around the training ground. Yes, he might be good in that sort of pastoral, if you like, role at the club, trying to bring on these strikers and trying to help them develop. But in terms of how close he is to actually being able to make a difference on the pitch, potentially still debatable, right?
Yeah, I think he is still training, and it's still possible that he will sign. Could be another one where, I mean, from what I've been told, money isn't so much of an issue. It's more proving his fitness. So I think that's a kind of ongoing situation, but it's not impossible he signs. You're right. Like, doesn't feel like the man you can hang your hat on. But at the same time, I just don't think a reliable centre forward is affordable or going to happen at this stage. Probably any centre forward that comes in, the percentage chance of them being a hit is less than 50. So you're weighing up the risk of a young loanee, someone who's never played any first team football but is a bit of a hot shot in PL2 or whatever, or someone like Antonio who's probably looking for their last contract but may be helpful around the training ground and brings a bit of experience. You're sort of having to choose what to take the risk on ultimately, and I think there is appetite to try and sign another forward. Could be Antonio, could be someone else, but it wouldn't shock me if another forward comes in and we're still having the same conversation, and that actually ends up being the best bet, that we just try and develop the two we've currently got, who we both see have flashes of potential and attributes that can be worked with. As you say, almost sort of complement each other in their strengths and weaknesses, which is frustrating. Like Luca, I'm sure, would have nodded in that chance Doumbia had early on last night, but then probably wouldn't have made life as awkward for centre backs in different moments. So I'd clearly another striker. It would be great if another striker came in. I think they need one, but I'd be surprised if they make the signing that solves the issue this week.
Deep joy. I was going to ask you, Adam, about the Sky Sports got hold of a list of 7 potential transfer incomings for Watford. There's a number of names on that list that we hadn't necessarily heard before. I think some of them would be positive if they were to happen, but in reality, the truth is we have no idea what is going to happen, do we? I think it feels like it's Watford aren't the only club trying to do late business. So I think going too much into depth into the names on that list would probably be not a waste of time. But
I think without going into depth, there is a bit of a merry-go-round of centre-back signings that are going to take place. So I think Swansea need a centre-back, Sheffield United are looking for centre-backs, Watford are looking for centre-backs, and lots of those names I've heard, and some of them are out there, like Fooney, obviously, McGuinness, Tyler Binden. These are the guys who are probably going to end up filling gaps across various championship squads, and it's just going to be a case of that all shaking itself out in the final days. So I'm not convinced that anybody knows which one they're going to end up with, but there are just this list of available options, basically.
Yeah, the musical chairs. Who's going to be where when the music stops? I think what we can say with certainty is that last night the game against Peterborough has fired the starting gun on arguably one of the most important weeks in Watford's recent history. We saw against Peterborough what sort of lineup we'd be putting out on a regular basis if there are 2 or 3 injuries and a suspension, which we all know there is in the Championship. The workload is great. That's the lineup we're going to get if we don't make serious inroads this week in the last days of the Championship. And if anyone was in any doubt, whether it's a supporter, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, or whether it's in the hierarchy, there can be no doubt anymore. Last night was that irrefutable evidence of the state of the football club. For the rights or wrongs, that's where we're at. This is what we are. The name of the game is football. We have a responsibility to put football teams out that are competitive. We were unable to do that categorically last night, miles and miles short of it. And there is both a short-term issue there that needs to be addressed immediately in the rest of the transfer market, and there is a long-term issue that needs to be addressed there as to why on earth it has happened. It feels like this has been bubbling for a while. We've been flying by the seat of our pants in terms of getting players out and then getting players in who can just about fit roles. Credit where it's due for being able to keep that conveyor belt going that ultimately keeps the lights on. Good players coming in and those good players get sold. But now the viability of the football club as a footballing entity is obviously in question. And unless something happens, we are in for a really, really tough ride. So last night, the Peterborough game was the starting gun on what I think is a really, really important period for Watford. And no doubt it'll be busy for you, Adam, and no doubt everyone...
with Swansea away on Tuesday night, so that's going to be an interesting evening.
Tremendous. 2 laptops, 3 phones, all that sort of business going on. So yeah, make sure you follow Adam for all that unfolding drama, I guess, and we'll see where we're at when that transfer window closes. We'll be back, of course, after West Ham United, when Mikel Antonio pops up to score a 90th minute winner to prove West Ham they were wrong to let him go. But we'll be back after the West Ham game to talk through that. Hopefully it'll be a slightly more upbeat conversation, certainly in terms of on-field endeavours. Adam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll be back. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And as always, come on, you ones!